Good afternoon, everyone. This is going to be our Safe Sanctuaries video for the year of 2023 for Sherman United Methodist Church volunteers and employees that are working with kids, youth, children, and vulnerable adults. If you have any questions, please let me know. After this is done, there will be a form you will need to fill out, and that is in my cubby for my mail in the office. So if you need any help with that, just let me know. Please fill that out and just stick it back in my cubby. Again, this is for 2023. So we will have another refresher next year in 2024. So just an outline, what we're going to go through today is we're going to talk about what safe sanctuaries is, some definitions, why it's important, and kind of what it has effects on the church and the community. And we're going to talk about our policy, what we do to put in place to prevent it, some things for recognition, and what our process is for reporting. So what is safe sanctuaries? Well, in 1996, the General Conference of the United Methodist Church adopted a resolution, and they adopted this resolution because tragically and unfortunately, churches have not always been a safe place for children. They have not always been a safe place for youth, for vulnerable people, and that this is hopefully a goal to in order to reduce sexual misconduct or abuse or physical abuse of that nature. So the biblical foundation that this comes from is Matthew 18:5-6, and we'll just read it. It says, "And whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me. But if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." So again, God takes it seriously. God takes it seriously to make sure his children are safe, to make sure his youth are safe, to make sure people who can't care for themselves are safe. And we want to make sure that we are protecting children from economic, physical, emotional, sexual exploitation and abuse, and ultimately have a community where they can grow safely and strong in the church. So some definitions for you guys. Vulnerable persons is any child or adult who is unable to protect himself or herself from abuse, neglect, exploitation, sexual abuse, emotional abuse of others. An adult is a person that is at least 18 years of age and at least 5 years or older than those being supervised. A youth is someone who is not under the age of 11, but not over 18, and child is anyone under the age of 11. So safe sanctuaries, again, is a policy or guidelines helped or developed to help protect vulnerable persons. Again, that's anyone who can't take care of themselves and children and youth, and to make our congregation a safe place that we can experiencing God's love and we can experience a great community of faith with one another. And then a roamer is someone who is screened, who has gone through this training, and they provide oversight in a facility. So let's say there are meetings going on with a vulnerable person, a youth, or a kid. There are other people that are going to be roaming around to make sure that meeting is okay, because it might be a one-on-one meeting. So more definitions from the Illinois Abuse and Neglected Child Reporting Act. Child abuse means a child whose parent or immediate family member or any person responsible for the child's well-being commits or allows physical abuse, sexual abuse, torture, ritual abuse, emotional abuse. And child neglection means that any child is not receiving proper or necessary support or medical or other things that are under the state law that is necessary for a child's well-being or other care necessary for his or her well-being. So why do we need it? Well, first and foremost, we want to protect the vulnerable persons. We want to protect them and make sure that that anyone who is going to walk through the door of Sherman United Methodist Church and in our community doesn't face even a potential of being harmed in any way that is physical or emotional or spiritual or any abuse of that kind. But we also want to make sure our volunteers are safe. We want to make sure that they feel confident coming in, that they're getting trained well, but we want to make sure that they are feeling confident that we are doing everything in our power to not let something like this happen, and that they are not going to be put in a wrong situation. But we also want to protect the church and the ministry. We've been called here in Sherman, Illinois, and we want to make sure that everything that is going on is going to benefit and to glorify God and to help His kingdom grow. So the church, a lot of people would say that, oh, the church, no way, that could never be a place where any of this would happen. Well, unfortunately, as we've seen in the past through different denominations, especially recently, there's been a lot of information that's come out where churches have not been that place. And I think some of the reasons is for that is we're a trusting organization. In our church here in Sherman, Illinois, we have an organization where kids come. There's probably 80 kids that come through the door each and every day. And it's a trusting organization where families let their children come to get watched, to be built up in faith, and the leaders are put in specific roles. So that is one right off the bat that it makes us susceptible of this happening. Another one is an opportunity for complacency. I have a lot of great coworkers here. I've had a lot of relationships built up, and past relationships that I've had with a lot of these people, whether volunteer or coworkers. So we know each other. We don't think that person would ever do that. We've been doing it for so long. I've been in this role for this is my fourth year. There's no way anyone around me would do anything like that. And again, just like, oh, I've known this church for a long time. There's no way anything like that could happen here. So that's another reason why it could be an opportunity of a tragic incident. And then lastly, we provide opportunities for close connection and relationships. What I mean by that is a lot of the times how people come to Jesus, how they strengthen their relationship with Christ is through close relationships where people are pouring into other people. And people who want to cause harm will see this as an opportunity. And we want to make sure we're putting everything forward to where we can build those relationships up, to where people can feel loved, can see Christ through us, but keeping them safe as well with the people we place around them. So effects of child abuse and neglect on a community. Obviously, it harms the vulnerable person. There's going to be trauma there, and it's going to be horrible. And there's going to be, if it's physical, then there's going to be damage, maybe permanent damage to them, and it's horrendous. And that is not something that we do not want to hear. That is not something that we want to hear at all. It divides a community. So again, if something like this happens, there's going to be a lot of finger point. There's going to be a lot of anger in our community that, again, nobody wants to have. There's going to be years of emotional pain for all involved, whether it's the parents that are involved, whether it's the church and the body of Christ that is involved, whether it's obviously the vulnerable persons. There's just going to be a ton of unseen pain that is going to happen. The parents have to question who they can trust and what organizations they can trust in community. Again, it jeopardizes what they could trust in the schools and churches. There's always litigation involved, and everybody who's involved in it, whether they had something to do with it or not, they are going to have blame and guilt and shame on the incident that happened. So again, we can't fail to implement any strategies to make sure this doesn't happen, because it shouldn't happen. And we need to put everything that we can into this to make sure it does not. So what can we do? Our policy, again, we're going to go into our prevention, our recognition, and response and reporting. So in our safe sanctuaries, we have a purpose statement that says the SUMC congregation's purpose for establishing this safe sanctuaries policy and accompanying procedures to demonstrate our strong and unwavering commitment to the physical and emotional and spiritual growth of our vulnerable persons. So our prevention, what's going to happen is to make sure that again we're putting good volunteers, we're employing good coworkers. We are going to first get their background checked. We're going to make sure that they are okay on their background check. We're never going to have a one-on-one situation with a youth. We're going to have open door counseling because a lot of sometimes, whether it's youth ministry, whether you're pulling a kid aside at one of our after school ministries. Sometimes one-on-ones need to happen, but that needs to make sure that it's an open door or a lot of windows. And again, you have that roamer in place to where there's going to be no room for funny business going on. We have the 5 years and older rule. That means that I can not be in charge of a vulnerable person's group that I am only 5 years older than or excuse me, I'm under 5 years older. We have the 3 month rule. You need to be a part of our congregation or well known by our congregation or employer or employee or whoever it may be for at least 3 months. Again, a lot of this happens because because a lot of this happens, or some of this happens frequently because the individual that wants to cause harm doesn't want to wait too long. So we want to make sure we have uh, a good mediator to make sure that they can't just have access right away, and make sure they can be trusted and they would be a good protector of vulnerable persons as we get to know them and during that 3 months. There'll be annual orientation, which is this. We will have a training every single year. A lot of it will be the same, but I try and make it different each year too. There's going to be an advance notice to parents. We're going to let them know what is going on. We're going to have a safe sanctuaries participation covenant. So again, you're going to sign into this covenant of how you're going to make sure that this is going to be an okay thing, and that you agree to this. And then we also have mandated reporter training, so we can get trained on what we should be looking for and we should be doing, even from a state level as well. So recognition, there's types of child abuse. There's physical, there's emotional, sexual, there's neglect, and there's ritual. And physical is anything that includes beating or a harmful restraint, use of a weapon or instrument that results in or could result in a serious injury. Sexual abuse is sexual behavior imposed on a vulnerable person, includes child pornography and suggestive behaviors or comments. Emotional abuse is expressing attitudes or behaviors towards a child that creates a serious emotional and psychological damage, and it can lead to anxiety, depression, withdrawal, or aggressive behavior towards self or others. Neglect is disregard to a vulnerable person's supervision or care, discipline, and the rituals, anything that includes hazing or cultic practices. And I have this, I'll put this in my cubby too. It's just a resource for you guys. It comes from the Children's Advocacy Centers of Illinois. I made the little chart, but it's just different signs and different things we can be looking out for as we are thinking and trying to excuse me, I just saw that I have a typo. As we are trying to make sure none of this happens, things to look out for as we are in roles, whether it's volunteer, employee, to children, and making sure that none of that is happening. So again, just different signs that we can look for. So our response and reporting, what that looks like is we're going to notify the parents, and we're going to notify the legal guardian, but we're also going to notify DCFS immediately as well. We're not going to confront the abuser with anger or hostility, but we are going to separate them to make sure that there is no more interaction with a vulnerable person and abuser. And we're going to treat them with dignity and make sure that everything's okay, because we don't want them to flare up or make sure that they're not going to lash out at us. And if that's parent, then we're going to make sure that the kid or a vulnerable person is with an authority figure or guardian of another sort to make sure they are safe from that, whoever the abuser is. We're going to notify the head pastor or event leader. So again, if it's coming from the youth ministry, head pastor, and then myself, because I'm the youth minister, or if it's our after school programs, head pastor and the director of that. We're gonna notify the proper law enforcement, the state agency. We're gonna notify our conference authorities, our church's insurance and church's attorney. We're gonna keep confidential written record of the church's response. We're gonna prepare a brief and honest statement for the congregation. No, again, we're not gonna have no unnecessary details. We're not gonna place blame, and we're not gonna excuse me, share anything with the victim's privacy or confidentiality. We're going to fully cooperate with the investigation, and that's going to be probably more specifically the person that reported it. We're going to make sure that they are going to fully comply, and then we're going to designate somebody from our SPRC as a spokesperson, as so there's not a whole bunch of people talking to the media, and then you have every single story out there when there's only one true story. So it's just important for us to remember that it's not against the law to report child abuse, even if the abuse didn't happen. Oh, excuse me, it is against the law to not report it, child abuse of any type, even if it didn't happen on church grounds or by a church member. We are responsible for reporting that. And what I was going into, which I jumped the gun on, was you don't need to prove that the abuse had taken place. You only need reasonable grounds for suspicion. We're immune. We have immunity for good faith reporting, which is later on the slide. And then our reports can be anonymous. So what we need to do is we need to listen carefully. We need to tell the child that we believe him or her, that it wasn't his or her fault, and let the child know that we're gonna make a report to help stop the abuse. We don't want to make any promises like we're not going to tell anyone. We don't want to push a child into giving more details about the abuse. We don't want to ask the child direct questions, and we don't need to talk to people who aren't involved in the situation. Unless they're the ones that like head pastor and the director or leader of that event, or the people that are going to put it, it's going to go to the authorities through that person. So here are my sources. This is extremely serious. We want to make sure that we are taking this seriously, because even in we may not realize that somebody might be having this idea or be taking part in this. Even in our local town, the greater Springfield area, the Illinois State Police just put on the sting operation of people trying to groom minors, and some of those people are familiar to people around here that you wouldn't think that ever would happen, and it did happen, unfortunately. And so it's important for us to take this seriously and to do everything we can to not have it happen. So this is our training video for 2023 Safe Sanctuaries. Again, resources in my Cubby mailbox and the form you need to sign there. If you have any questions, please reach out. Happy to help and answer anything, or even go into this more in depth if you have any questions about it. Thank you guys, and I'll be praying for your guys' role this year as it pertains to the youth of our community.